Hey guys, I'm Jeff with Shutter Zone Media, and today I want to talk to you about our post-production, what we do once we get out of the field and we get in front of our computer, and what does that process look like? Before I start talking about what we do in post-production, I have to talk a little bit about what we do when we're in the field. So what is our settings, what do we set up, and how do we set ourselves up for when we get in front of the computer? So one of the things that we're setting up is our camera settings. We're shooting in 4K, 60 frames per second. And then what are the other things that we do? We're looking at white balancing between the rooms. And then in post, what I'll have to do is I'll actually create the white balance correction, and then I'll have to blend it going in between the two rooms. Now if it's really bad, sometimes I'll actually go into a white balance auto. When I'm doing real estate, I'd rather do everything in manual mode. So there are times when you're using like either white balance or auto ISO, especially when you're walking from the outside and then you're walking to the inside of a house. But typically I try to stick with my manual settings. We're actually going to set up our timeline in 1080p, 30 frames per second. Yes, we're shooting in 60 frames, and yes, we are putting it in 30 frames. So that means that I can take my 60 frames per second, slow it down to 30 frames. I'm slowing down the video to half, which is giving me smoother, buttery looking footage. And it also allows me to take that 4K footage and I can zoom in on that footage without having any loss from when I'm going from 4K to 1080. Sometimes the gimbal gets tilted or whatnot, and we can zoom in that shot and then we can adjust it accordingly. So, and I'm working with Final Cut, so when I do a new project, I'm gonna make the project 1080p in 30 frames like I had mentioned, and I'll just say new project. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to organize all that footage. Now I shoot everything in order of drone, then I go into the house and I shoot everything wide, and then I'll go back and then I'll shoot everything cinematic, all the tight shots. So here's all the cinematic tight shots, and I'm going to highlight all of those clips, and I know that should go pretty much all the way to the end of all those tight shots, and I'm going to take those and I'm going to start placing them in order of where they belong. That's the first thing I see. I walk in, I see that living room, so I'm going to take all of those shots. I'm going to drag it right in between. Alright, and then I'm going to do that a bunch more time until everything is in order. Alright, here's an example. So like when I'm outside and I'm doing my walk-in shot, one of the things I'm going to make sure when I'm walking in is that that exposure is not overexposed. As you can see on the top here, we got the video scope here that's going to tell me where my highlights are too high and or if my shadows aren't low enough. So I can either go through and I can correct all of these individually, which sometimes I will do. So for example, in this shot you could see that my highlights right here are low enough as far as my shadows, and I might have to bring my highlights up a little bit. So before I get all crazy into the editing aspect of this, I might go through here and go into my color corrections, and as you can see, I'm going to start a create a keyframe. If you're not familiar with keyframes means that I'm creating a spot in the video that it has to be either me zoomed in or maybe I'm color correcting, and then if I keyframe a little bit further down, that means that I'm going to create a transition essentially from that keyframe to the next. So right now I'm going to take this keyframe because it's a little on the bright side, and I'm going to bring down those shadows, I'm going to bring down those highlights. Now you're going to notice when I go further into the room, now I'm also crooked here, which I'm going to fix that with some keyframes too. So here I'm straight, but right now I'm more focused on the coloring aspect. So I'm going to bring the coloring, and I'm going to bring my shadows back up a little bit here, and then highlights can just slightly come down. We want to be right under 100 if we can. In fact, I could probably bring that up just a little bit. And then you can also mess with your midtones too here. Now this is going to be the same area. If I wanted to, or if I needed to, I could also create, the temperature, whether it's too warm or too blue because of the light. I can adjust for that here too. So because we were outside, I might want to bring the blues down just a little bit here, and as long as my red, green, and blue are even across the board here, then my color correction is good. Now I'm going to go back to fixing the actual rotation of this. Now this is where in 4K comes in handy, because I can zoom in on the image a little bit. I'm going to be able to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate it to being straight. Now let's go to the next spot where it turns on me a little bit. So right here I'm maybe a little crooked. So we're going to add another keyframe. So we're going to go position, rotation, and let's see, position, rotation, right here, position, rotation, and then I'm going to the next keyframe by pushing that arrow. Now this is Final Cut. People use different programs, so I'm going to rotate that so it's just a little on the straighter side right there. And we're going to check it right about here, still straight. We're still pretty straight here. And I'm going to fix that just a little bit here. Position, rotation, just slightly. Okay, got it. Now I can take a look back at that footage. I'm going to look at my graph to make sure everything looks good. And if I need to, I can put layers down too, so adjustment layers, and I can do that throughout the entire clip. So what I'm going to do now, I just did one individual. I can adjust all of these if I need to, because it could be that the footage is maybe a little bit too yellow, and you know, as you can see, my reds are a little bit higher here. In fact, if you look throughout the video, the reds are a little bit more dominant, so I'm going to adjust that just so. I want to make at least a good average for this, and then I can tweak on the back end. So then I can also bring down my shadows a little bit here, and you can see it just crispens up the image a little bit. Now these are all things that we do before we even hand it off to our editors, before they even start editing. So there's a lot of editing on the back end that happens before we start editing it ourselves. And then the editor may adjust accordingly too. So I'm going to bring that all the way across so that covers the entire project. Now another thing I'll do, because we don't need it, I'm going to detach the audio and just delete that. We don't need it. Since I'm working with a 30 frame timeline, I can just go to automatic speed, and that's just going to adjust all of my clips automatically, so it goes down to 30 frames. If I was working with a 24 frame timeline, then it would actually slow it down to 40%. When I'm doing real estate and we do 30 frames, it just gives it a smoother, sharper look. We used to do 24, we've now moved over to the 30 frames. It just looks better. And then I'm going to take my adjustment layer and I'm going to put that over all of these clips. Another thing I like to do when I'm actually at the property is I will turn all the fans on. I'll make sure we got fireplace on, so it just kind of gives it that little extra pop, as you can see here with the fireplace. Now this is again footage slowed down. You can see how it gives it a little bit extra cinematic look when you just slow it down at 30 frames. And then another thing that I'll do in my adjustment layer, I can add in sharp. We'll just sharpen up the image just slightly. A little extra sharp just sharpens that image, you know, just at a 2.5. And we're going to find some music. In fact, we already have some music already selected for this. So what we use is either like Epidemic Sound or Sound Stripes. We use basically a lot of music that has no royalties attached to it, so that allows you to either post it on your social medias without getting hit for having that soundtrack put onto either your YouTube or your Facebook. So anyways, those are some of the things that we do. We pay the rights for the realtors to be able to use that music at the back end, so then we can distribute it to you without having to worry about if you're going to get hit with that music in the background. So, and then a few other things that we do too, and you've probably seen us do, and I'll just throw it in here real quick, is speed ramps. You know, and here we are just getting downstairs, just starting that slow motion, but then we're going to bring it right here. So then we'll do a little fast 4 times. All right, now that we're downstairs, kind of bring it right into the... And then another thing our editors will do, and we can do that too, is then we'll also go into stabilization. So we'll stabilize that footage even more so. I'm not going to have you wait, but it just smooths out our footage. This is just a few things that we do in the back end here at Shutter Zone Media to make sure that your listing shines. And here at Shutter Zone Media, we just want to make sure that we get the most amount of people through the door to take a look at your listings to help you get top dollar. So if you haven't already, check us out, shutterzonemedia.com. If you're interested in doing video and or photos, please contact myself or anybody else in the team, and hopefully create yourself an amazing cinematic video to help you and your clients get top dollar on your next listing. If you guys are interested in seeing more content, we have weekly content, so click and subscribe. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. We'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching this, and you guys have a good one.